In the summer of 1904, Hermann Merkel, chief forester at the Bronx Zoo in New York City, was walking his usual rounds when he noticed something wrong with the chestnut trees. Swollen, orange-brown cankers had appeared on the bark. Patches of dry wood surrounded clusters of small dots he'd never seen before. He treated them with fungicide. By the following spring, nearly every chestnut on the grounds was infected, the oldest giants down to the youngest sprigs. Within 40 years, 4 billion American chestnut trees would be dead. Not a forest, not a region, a species, functionally erased from the continent. We went through USDA plant introduction logs, State Forestry Commission records, and over a century of academic research. The file on this one starts in 1876 and never closes. Sources are in the description. Here's what was sitting in the archive the entire time. Before the Blight, the American chestnut was the most important hardwood tree in the eastern United States. It grew from southern Maine to the Florida Panhandle, west to the Mississippi. 1 out of every 4 hardwood trees in the Appalachian Range. Some stood over 100 feet tall. Trunks stretched 16 feet across. They called it the redwood of the East. But it wasn't just big. It was useful in ways almost no other tree could match. The wood was straight-grained, lightweight, and naturally rot-resistant. Settlers built entire cabins from a single tree. Barns, fence posts, railroad ties, telephone poles, furniture, musical instruments, all chestnut. In 1919, North Carolina alone produced 70 million board feet of chestnut lumber. The bark was rich in tannic acid, the key ingredient for softening animal hides. More than half the vegetable tannin used by the entire American leather industry at the turn of the century came from chestnut bark. In a single year, 1909, 100,000 cords of chestnut fed 5 large tanneries in the Asheville region alone. And every autumn, the nuts came. Billions of them, blanketing the forest floor 4 inches deep in places. Families raked them into bushels. Wagon loads went to town for cash. Children sold bags of roasted chestnuts on street corners. Hogs and cattle fattened on them in the open woods. Bears, turkeys, deer, squirrels, the entire Appalachian food chain ran through one tree. For mountain families with no other cash crop, the chestnut harvest was the difference between surviving the winter and not. The fungus that killed it, Cryphonectria parasitica, came from East Asia, almost certainly aboard imported Japanese chestnut nursery stock. Japanese and Chinese chestnuts had co-evolved with the fungus for thousands of years. They carried it, but it barely harmed them. American chestnuts had never encountered it. They had 0 resistance. No one knows exactly when the first infected shipment arrived. The earliest recorded Japanese chestnut imports date to 1876. Nurseries across the East Coast had been selling them for decades before Merkel spotted the first cankers at the Bronx Zoo. By the time anyone identified the problem, the fungus was already established across multiple states. William Murrell, a mycologist at the New York Botanical Garden, isolated the pathogen in 1905 and proved it was killing the trees. His assessment was bleak. He told the press the fungus would ultimately destroy all remaining chestnuts and recommended they be harvested immediately. What happened next moved fast, and the documented record shows who profited from the collapse. The blight spread at roughly 50 miles per year, carried by wind-borne spores, rain, birds, and insects. It entered through cracks in the bark, then secreted oxalic acid, a toxin that killed the tree's cells from the inside. First a canker would appear, the bark bulging or sinking. Then the wound burst open, sending orange spores outward. The upper limbs died first, then the trunk. A large tree could be dead within 18 months. By 1909, the chestnut timber industry was cutting 600 million board feet per year, over $10 million annually flowing to large timber companies operating across Appalachia. The bark alone supplied more than half the vegetable tannin used by the entire American leather industry. Some of the biggest timber operations were actually subsidiaries of leather companies, organized specifically to harvest chestnut tannin from land bought to secure that supply. As the blight advanced, lumbermen scrambled to salvage. Healthy trees that might have carried natural resistance, were cut down before they could be infected and begin to rot. The panic logging may have destroyed the very genetics that could have saved the species. The timber companies profited on the way in and on the way out. Stand at the edge of an Appalachian ridge in 1925 and look out. Where dense canopies of white chestnut blossoms once lit up the mountainside every June, now there are grey trunks, skeletal, bark stripped, standing dead among the oaks and hickories. The forest looks like it survived a war. Underground, the fungus is doing something precise. It slips through a wound, colonizes the bark, and grows a network of thread-like filaments that encircle the trunk, choking off water and nutrients to everything above. The cambium, the thin living layer just beneath the bark, dies in a ring. Everything above the ring dies with it. First the leaves yellow and curl, then the bark splits open, exposing pale wood to the air. Branches drop, the crown goes bare. A tree that took a century to reach full height becomes a grey column in 18 months. Zoom out. The blight advances at 50 miles per year, tree by tree, ridge by ridge, state by state. From the air, the wave front is visible. Green canopy behind, grey skeleton ahead, a moving line of death crossing the mountains. But below ground, something else is happening. The roots survive. The fungus can't compete with soil organisms at the root collar. So the root system pushes up new shoots, green, vigorous sprouts that grow 5, 10, sometimes 15 feet before the blight finds them again. The cankers return, the trunk dies, the roots push up again. This cycle, growth, infection, death, regrowth, has been repeating for over a century. The species is alive, but it cannot reproduce. It is functionally extinct. The response was immediate and entirely inadequate. 1911. Pennsylvania created the Chestnut Tree Blight Disease Commission and appropriated $275,000. They carved a mile-wide firebreak across the state, cutting every chestnut in a band stretching across the mountains. The fungus leapt it. Boy Scouts were enlisted to scour forests and cut infected trees. A Pennsylvania newspaper urged, "Woodman, burn that tree, spare not a single bough." None of it worked. 1912, 3 states, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and South Carolina, reported combined chestnut losses valued at $82.5 million. 1914, World War I diverted funding. Research was cut, the blight kept moving. 1940, most mature American chestnuts were dead. By 1950, the blight had swept through the entire native range, 300,000 square miles, 9 million acres of devastated forest. The USDA started a breeding program to cross American chestnuts with resistant Chinese varieties. They abandoned it in 1960. The Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station tried the same approach. They stopped in 1970. For the next decade, nobody was working on the problem at all. Today, an estimated 430 million American chestnut sprouts still grow in eastern forests, but almost none reach maturity. Most die before they can flower. The tree that once made up a quarter of the Appalachian canopy now exists as an understory shrub, trapped in a cycle of regrowth and death. The ecological damage cascades. At least 7 moth species native to southern Appalachia went extinct after losing the chestnut. Black bear, turkey, and deer populations lost their most reliable annual food source. The forest floor, once enriched by chestnut leaves carrying high concentrations of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, shifted to oak leaf litter with lower nutrient value. The entire soil chemistry of the eastern forest changed, and the human cost ran deeper than timber. In Appalachia, the chestnut wasn't just a tree. It was the economic foundation of mountain life: food, building material, cash crop, livestock feed. When the trees died, subsistence farming collapsed. Coal mining filled the vacuum. The mountain communities that lost their chestnuts lost their independence with them. For 10,000 years, the American chestnut dominated the eastern forest. It fed civilizations, built a nation's infrastructure, and anchored the most productive hardwood ecosystem on the continent. Then a single imported pathogen, carried on nursery stock that nobody inspected, found a species with no defense and erased it in 40 years. Timber companies profited from the salvage. Leather companies extracted tannin until there was nothing left to extract. And when the trees were gone, everyone walked away. The USDA's own plant introduction records documented the Japanese nursery imports. The quarantine failures were known. The blight's origin was traced. The research on the fungus was published. The root systems are still alive, still sending up shoots, still dying. The file was sitting there the entire time. Nobody opened it. The chestnut files were really extensive, but still can't compare it to what we are working on for next time. Stick around for more of the Farmer's Archives with Nate and our team supporting his project. Subscribe so you don't miss what we find. Thanks for watching.